postures of love, the steps towards joy. And because when we come to this work, as you notice, there's a lot of technical detail, there's a lot of new data, and sometimes people can wonder, well, where's the love here? Where's the spiritual side of it? Or, you want to nurture that side of yourself that you associate as the spiritual side of who you are. And we'll see really that the whole understanding of Kathara and kinetic science is actually based on love in its most fundamental and core expression. Okay, so what we're going to look at is the postures of love. Now, when I started to research this, I thought, well, why postures? I'd often wondered, why is the word posture used, okay, rather than attitude or whatever, okay? And when I was going through some of the materials, I found Ash referring to a particular set of codes. She referred to some codes as being vehicles, which were like movement, to do with movement, and others were postures. And she said that they were like stationary fields within which movement could occur. Okay, so they were like a stable field within which other things or other actions could take place. And that could remind us a little bit maybe of the Manu energy. It's actually the still point within which other actions take place. So the postures of love and the steps towards joy. And another thing I noticed when I was going through the materials is that the words love and joy were often used in the same sentence or the same paragraph in the materials where I got most of this information. And they were also, interestingly enough, often used in the same context as concepts like free will, divine power, divine right order, and the law of cause and effect. All right, so a lot of the understanding of true joy and true love very much relates to understanding our role in coming into creation and our innate ability to create and what we intended when we came into creation, with the understanding that each one of us, as we were saying in the previous module, each one of us is a direct expression of source. Each one of us has a part of self which is in that still point and is in that vast consciousness field of source. And the fact that we are here implies that we have parts of ourselves all the way through all of the dimensions, okay? And when we came into creation, we came in with the knowledge of how this worked. So that's the context in which I'm going to explore the concept of love for the first quarter or so of this module, because love of all concepts and of all words in our language and in our society, it means so much, doesn't it? And it just means so much that it isn't. I mean, it's often used for manipulation or control, for guilt, for wanting to, kind of drain somebody else or want to control them, want to manipulate them in some way. Or we've also been trained or encouraged to believe in our culture that we seek love from the outside. There was a song, "You're nobody till somebody loves you." And there's another song, apparently, "I looked for love in all the wrong places." And there's always this kind of feeling that I have to look for love. And I'm okay if somebody loves me, but if nobody loves me, well, then I'm not okay. And that kind of thing. It's so strong in our culture that love is something that we get from outside. And that love from outside is what will validate us as worthy of dignity, as it were, okay? And what we're looking at in Kathara and kinetic science is understanding that the very nature of ourselves, at the core of our being, is actually the nature of love. And that when we begin to get a feeling of that, we don't need to look for love from outside. We can be love. And that is the context of both the symbol code that I chose for this and also the quotation, which I felt was very apt. The symbol code is one that many of us feel a great affection for. It's called the Anatilia. And if you look at it, it's quite like what we were looking at earlier in terms of the first Uma A and the first Parthakai moving out into creation, then coming back again, the second coming back in again, right? It's very much like the same structure. And among other things, this Anatilia code, it represents the understanding that in order to have a loving relationship with anybody, we first of all need to have a loving relationship with ourselves. We need to be able to connect back with our own inner core and our own connection to source. There's there's an expression which one of our speakers, Mac, loves to quote all the time: "My relationship with source comes first," right? That our main function is to embody the fullness of who we are as divine beings And if we do that fully, then we will embody love. And it says here, be the love, embody the love. And thus you will see reflected everywhere around you the reality of the love that is the foundation of all creation. The degree to which you recognize and embrace the eternal love of the God source within you will be the degree to which you are able to identify, experience, recognize, and embrace the eternal love that is always present within all aspects of your external hologram. Okay, so it's really putting the power back in us. What we see in our hologram is actually a direct reflection back to us of what's in our own energy system, right? And as we begin to really anchor and embody that love and get in touch with the core aspect of our being, we will be able to experience more love in our lives. And it will also enable us to see how what seems to be negative things in our environment, that they may actually be also the outplay of the laws of love, right? So we will look at that as well, what's called the laws of divine love. So that is the context within which we'll look at it. Now, this quotation and the next few that I'm going to be looking at with you comes from a very good article in the Master's Stewardship Manual on the Law of One. And it's very powerful if any of you have that book. It's well worth reading. And it states that the Law of One promotes unconditional love, co-nurturing and healing of all races through the recognition that all manifest beings are faces of Source, manifest. Right? And that's not just, again, a philosophical statement. It actually means that every one of us here can truthfully say, I am a manifest, I am a face of Source manifest. The person sitting beside you, right? The people outside, even the people in our lives that might annoy us or that we don't get on with, they are also faces of Source. People we see or actions we see in our environment that may not seem to us to be godly in the sense of being sweet or nice, they are also faces of God. Everything is a face of God, right? And so everything is Source in some way exploring creation. And some of the time, how Source and how we as expressions of Source learn how, for example, the laws of divine love work is when we see, well, when they're not followed, and how the consequence works then. So we're learning, even in situations in our lives that don't seem to be loving, or people in our lives that don't seem to be loving, or the times when we find ourselves not being loving. We can learn hugely from them if we understand the core laws of divine love and our connection to them, okay? So if we can honestly say, and I remember Ash was saying this in one of the workshops, and we were talking about it earlier, if you can say in your mind, I am God, just try it, just in your mind, just thinking, I am God, okay? I am God. Right? Now, see how you feel with that, right? Does it feel just, well, that's natural, right? Who else would I be, kind of, okay? All right? Or is there a feeling of discomfort or a feeling of, I'm God, okay? Now, when we really begin to feel that I am God, what comes with that is a wonderful humility, because you really understand that, well, if I am God, so is everybody else. Okay? So it says here that when one expands to encompass the knowing, I am God, one simultaneously understands the all is God, and therefore does not place the personal, individuated identity as above or superior to any other manifestation of the God mind. Humility in reference to all life and not the illusions of personal grandeur is the result of knowing the self as the I am presence in complete at-one-ment with God. So it's humility. It's interestingly enough, we were talking about language earlier, and the English word humility comes from a Latin word to do with the earth, and it means like being, your feet solidly on the ground. It means like being humble. Humility isn't where you are sort of prostrating yourself in front of somebody else, because that's actually insulting the God within yourself, okay? And in a lot of our traditions, we've been encouraged to be humble and kind of think ourselves as lowly, and we're not talking about that at all. True humility is knowing yourself, but knowing everybody else also as an expression of God. Because if we don't, if we say, as our traditions have encouraged us to say, put God or authority figures as above us in some way and that we are lowly, then we are actually not recognizing the divine in ourselves. So we are actually denying God in a way, right? The fact of being God is a given by the very fact of existence, all right? And that applies to everybody, including ourselves. I mean, I think we're all still coming into balance. We've been through quite a trip through the dimensions, and most of us have either gone one way or the other, even in terms of love and self-worth and all of those things. We may go to the extreme of thinking we're it, and the ego, we go to the superiority thing, or else we can go the opposite and we can think we're less worthy than other people. Or conversely, as we'll be talking later on about the actual postures of love, we may go to the extreme of kind of looking after everybody else and not looking after ourselves, and thinking somehow that that's very noble. Or we might be the ones who are always looking after ourselves and don't care about anybody else. And the balance, because remember we were saying there that remember in the first module we were talking about that the first light cell when we came into externalization was the flame of Amorea, the flame of love. Okay, so the first externalization into this manifest creation, the external aspect of creation, was through the flame of love. So love is what we are, but it is the love of the Manu energy when it's in full balance, and then when it comes out into play, it always does so with the understanding and the feeling of connection to itself and to source. Okay? Now, one of the areas that is important to understand in terms of love, and this is explored really well. There's a document in the Forbidden Testaments of Revelation handbook called A Brief Orientation to Christic Merkaba, and there's actually a summary of it on the Azurite Press website. Okay, it's under the Christic, something about the Christ or something. It's in the website, and in that there is a very profound discussion about the whole understanding of what we might call free will, about love, about the law of consequence, the laws of divine love. Okay, and we were saying earlier when we were talking about sound and the whole thing of creation, that when Source moves out into creation, it creates a structure for itself. It's like it creates a playing field within which it can express its full creativity. As we were saying, it'd be like a troupe of dancers, and when you're going out to do your dance, you all know where you're supposed to be, you know the mathematics, you know the laws, you know the rules, and when you really know them, you can actually explore your creativity in fullness and in freedom. All right. Now, when we, as Source, because each one of us came out into manifestation, we actually devised, as a collective of Source, we created the rules of the dance, if you like, or we created the structure of the music we were going to play, or whatever term you want to use. Okay, and we wanted to explore this wonderful expression of creativity and the dance of creation, and we wanted to have the freedom to try new things. Now, we wanted to do that, and in order to do that, we needed to have free will. But we also needed to have some way of, well, okay, I know what the rules are, and the laws and the structures, and in order to have free will, we also needed to have the free will to go against those rules, as it were, okay? Because if you go into creation and you are programmed completely for joy and love and order, then you're not really free to explore. So within the free will context within which we came into creation was that we would have freedom to explore all of the ramifications of creation, and we would have the freedom to go against our original intent if we wanted to, okay? But there was also the proviso that if we went so much against what's called the original intention of divine love and divine order, that it would be allowed to go to a certain extent, but then there would have to be saying, listen, that's enough, because if you really go wild here, you'll destroy the creation itself, okay? And the other thing, part of the lesson of love, was that we would learn as well that we are all, on the level of Source, we are all masters of creation. And an aspect of becoming a master of creation in the manifest worlds is where we begin to see that every action has what's called consequence or a reciprocal reaction. So if we act in, for example, loving ways and ways that are in congruence with the laws of creation, we would experience ever-expanding joy and love and creativity. If we went against them and actually did something which at that level we would know, yes, that's not what I decided to, I'm going to do it anyway and see what happens, okay? Then we would learn from the actual going against the original intention. We would learn what worked and what didn't work. So there was an allowance for that. There's an allowance for free will choice. But there was also like saying, well, we'll allow it to go to a certain extent, and then we will have to say that enough is enough, right? Because otherwise the whole game, the whole dance would actually wouldn't exist, as it were, for everybody else to explore creativity. So it is a kind of like a paradox. We have free will, but it's free will within the context of divine will. But divine will here is not the will of some external God up on a throne somewhere. It's our own will when we come into creation, okay? We wanted to explore creativity, and we knew that there needed to be some kind of structure and some kind of order within which we could actually be free to create fully. And so the paradox of free will is that there is the preference of source is that we would be joyful, we would be loving, but if we didn't have the option of doing the opposite, we wouldn't be totally free. All right, so that's an important understanding, especially later when we're looking at concepts like what we call tough love, where sometimes it is actually very loving sometimes to let people meet the consequences of their actions, even though they might think we were being unkind to them. All right, sometimes people need to learn. We need to learn by the results that we get in our hologram or by what comes back to us, what works and what doesn't. And that would, among other things, that is what we call the law of divine love, which we'll see in a moment, okay? So the paradox of free will, there are laws of allowance, but there are also laws of balance. To come back into balance, remember the Manu energy is the point of balance. But if we act in ways that we go too extreme on the magnetic or the holding energy, or too extreme on the other, the masculine and the feminine, or in their various expressions, then at some point, source itself will make sure we come back into balance, okay? And it says here, cosmic order was designed to express the original Christic divine intention of perpetual motion, eternal life, love-based, free will creation. And just sometimes people aren't sure that the Christic with a K applies more to what we might call the cosmic level. All right, like the level beyond the time matrix, as it were. And the word CH, the Christic with a CH, applies more to the level D12 on down, okay? And again, that's explained very well in that particular document. It's really well worth reading if this interests you, okay? So, the cosmic order expresses this original intention of perpetual motion and eternal life. And as we saw when we were looking at the ums and the uns and the ahs, what gives us eternal life is when source will, that first particle moved out into creation, and then it would spark, it would move out into its ha and its la, and then they come back together again, go back into source, and that would allow that energy to replenish itself and to allow the creation to take place, okay? But there is like a give and take, a breath in breath or an out breath of God and of source, and that is part of the natural balancing. So that allows for what's called perpetual motion, eternal life, love-based, free will creation. But it is a bit paradoxical. We have free will, but it's within a certain parameter, all right? Because otherwise the whole manifestation template might get, irreparably damaged, okay? So what we're talking here is the law of reciprocity. You will reap what you sow, or what goes round comes round, which is the dynamic of consequence to chosen action. That's probably clear enough to everybody, okay? All right, and cosmic order is designed to be a self-sustaining, self-rebalancing system. So there are just definite rules, like the rules of the game. If you're playing a game of football or something, you have rules. And it's the same thing. We have rules of the game so that the self-sustaining comes from that backflow to source, and then it can come out again. We have a contact with our source, as it were. Okay? All right, so these are, and it's interesting that these are the laws of divine love. The laws of divine love are reciprocity, allowance, and balance. And they're collectively known as the laws of divine love. So it's like, as you sow, so shall you reap. You're allowed, but there's a natural balance. Okay? And so that's a very important understanding of love. Because love in our society has often been kind of associated with being very sweet and very nice. and like, you know, pink roses and champagne and being nice and sweet. And sometimes when people are being firm, that's not necessarily seen as loving. But in this context, it can actually be extremely loving to be very firm with somebody, all right? Or to not allow them to damage themselves or not allow them to disrespect other people. That love is a very powerful energy when we begin to really embody it. Now, remember we said earlier on, that's why in the last module leads nicely into this one, that the first light cell coming into the manifest arena was the Amorea flame, okay? And we were saying that that is the eternal flame of divine love. It's the eternal, internal flame of God consciousness, right? It is not something external to ourselves. And we're going to see in the materials, it talks about the Azure A. And if you're new to the work, you may not have heard that term. But the Azure A refers to a point in our anatomy. If you remember the Cathara grid, okay, there's the Cathara grid. And if you imagine the Cathara grid like in your own body, all right, the Azure A is literally at the center. It's between levels 6 and 7. Okay, it's literally at the center of the Cathara grid. You'll see that, the Azure A. And in our anatomy, it actually is where in the thymus area, in the thymus gland, okay? And that is our eternal, as they say in some of the materials, it's the location of our two-way swinging door to God's source, okay? We can go back home, in and out from our connection to source is as intimate to us as the core of our own being, okay? So that it's a very really important, you know, to be aware of that, okay? So the Amorea flame is not something external to us in any way. And it is at the very intimate core of our own being, because it's through that flame that we came into manifestation. So we embodied that when we came into manifestation. And there is very much a part of our own being which is very much embodying that all the time, okay? So what we're going to do now in a minute is I want to just give you a feeling sense of this as well as sort of a talking at you about the experience of love, and that contact with love is just totally within your own being, because that actually helps in terms of realizing that love is truly at the core of all creation. As we were saying earlier, when the Beatles said love is all there is, it is actually true, but it isn't that sweet kind of sugary love that is afraid to look at negative things, okay? So it's a very strong, powerful force, okay? So what I'd like to do, just for a few moments with you, is do part of a technique. Now, it's from the Flame Body series, and if you haven't done it yet, that's fine, but I would advise you at some point, recommend you, I should say, to do the Flame Body techniques. They're really, really lovely to do. And in this one, we're going to imagine ourselves actually at this, you know, imagine you putting your attention into the Azure A, as an azurite, and this is like a lovely deep blue, okay? And we're going to do like a technique. I'm going to read to you and ask you to imagine and feel the energy of that level, and then to, in your own heart, to say certain affirmations which I will read for you, okay? With the hope that you will begin to feel, yes, that connection to source and to the flame of love is as close to me as my breathing, as it were, okay? And if you can begin to feel that, then it puts a very, very powerful context to the energy of love, all right, and the way we're going to talk about it as we go through, all right? So maybe just for a moment, if you've all done a Maharic Shield today, or you've done some version of it, okay? You just quickly bring up your Maharic Shield, or whatever level of technique you're at, okay? Just for a moment. So, move your mental attention to a point of focus at the top of the breastbone at chakra 8, just above chakra 4, and below chakra 5, below the clavicle. Beneath this position on the physical body lies the Azure A, the tiny control center for the embodied Cathara grid template. within the base of the thymus gland. With attention focused in the azure egg, imagine that a deep azure blue azurite crystal sphere is located within the azure egg. Within the azurite crystal lies the throne of power, the center point of the embodied Eka God seed, through which the eternal flame of Amorea embodies. Imagine now that your awareness is a spark of pale silver Maharic, that's D12, light. As this spark of Maharic light, imagine that you are traveling into the center of the azurite crystal sphere, to the gateway of the Amorea flame of eternal Christed love. Imagine Amorea Gateway as a tiny Maharic silver egg, the cosmic Amorea egg, encased within a deep azure blue spherical standing wave. Imagine that you, as the eternal Maharic spark, move to the center of the Amorea egg within the azurite crystal. You have entered the place of your eternal birthright. You have entered the hallowed ground of your original divine heritage as a living expression of the one God source. The Amorea egg within the Amorea gateway and Manu azurite flame is the eternal still point through which the still small voice of the God self within speaks. Visualize or intend that you, as the spark of Maharic light, are now positioned within the Amorea gateway. A pale silver spark of light encased within this pale silver Amorea egg, within the eternal azurite flame of the deep azure blue azurite crystal sphere. The inner Eka center point of creation. Here, all things are eternally still, calm, and peaceful. Here is the sanctuary within, the inner temple of Chemelohati, the eternal safe ground and perpetual guardian of one's personal, eternal, direct relationship to God Source. Imagine now that you can sense the living presence of God Source, and your personal God self everywhere around you. You are encased within its eternal love, mercy, protection, and divine understanding. From this point of eternal power and love, you can heal all, understand all, love all, co-create all. Within the Amorea egg, you and God Source are one. You are now your God self. Breathe slowly and gently and feel the truth of your God self. Here, now, eternal. Feel the truth of your peace. Acknowledge and fully affirm this with strength. Repeating, either out loud or in your mind, whichever you prefer, the following declaration of the God Self. I am peace now. I am at one with all. I am in a safe and loving universe now. I am love, and I am loved. I am innocent. I am healed. I know my eternal truth now. I am my eternal truth now. I am one with God now. I express as God now. And so it is. Just take a few moments just to really get a feeling sense of your inner connection to Source. Just tone quietly for those of you who know the Shaddai, just that line, okay? Just a few times, because what we're saying in this is again affirming that I am an expression of first cause light, the flame. Okay, so just quietly a few times. Shaddai Urvei Tan. Shaddai Urvei Tan. Shaddai Urvei Tan. Shaddai Urvei Tan. Please, if you like. Shaddai Urvei Tan. Shaddai Urehahuntan. Shaddai Urehahuntan. Shaddai Urehahuntan. Just one more time. Shaddai Urehahuntan. So when you're ready, just gently open your eyes. Did you feel that connection? Everybody feels some little connection to your inner self. Okay. It's actually, that's what the toning, did you feel the toning really amplifying for you? Because you're really saying, I am. The translation of that line is all embracing pillar of first cause light, I as this expression now. You're saying, right now, I am an expression of first cause light, of the divine love and whatever. Okay, so you're really anchoring it in your body and in your whole system, and you see it as well. Okay, so that is your connection. That's as close as you are to the love of the divine is within your own being. Okay, so this is just probably I hope you'll all get a feeling sense even from what we've done that that at-one-ment and absolute love, through the condition of at-one-ment with God, through selflessness and humility, genuine love can be known. The only cure, absolute cure for any malady is absolute love. Okay? So, absolute love. And of course, absolute love has many ways of expressing itself, which we'll look at in a few moments. Okay? All right. So, you're getting a feeling of the core of love within your own being. Okay? Because if you get a feeling of that, that is a taste of the framework within which each one of us stepped into creation. And because we loved that connection so much, we created a framework and a sort of structure by which that could be maintained, even if we decided to do the opposite sometimes, to see what happened when we did the opposite. Okay? And we've learned hugely from, maybe forgetting that connection. I know I can speak for myself anyway, that having felt lonely and separated and all the things that I think most of us have felt, that when you begin to reconnect to that love, you appreciate it so much more. It is so precious because, in a way, we've experienced the lack of it, or at least I have, I think most of us have. You experience the lack of it, or you experience what happens when you act in ways that don't create that connection. So you actually value the love and the connection so much more. And remember that each one of us are the eyes and the face and the lips and the hand of Source in dimensionalization. So you can imagine Source itself is learning through us. Every time we understand something more or we expand in our awareness, that is actually giving a gift back to Source as well. Right? So it's wonderful to think of it like that we have learned hugely especially when we look at the environment around us, and it can seem in some ways that love is not, operating in many situations. But if we understand the laws of divine love, maybe love is perfectly operating because we are learning what doesn't work as much as what does. Right? So it's just a good point to be aware of. Now, we'll just bring the kind of more spiritual side of the love being everywhere and that side of things, bring it a little bit more into how can we begin to make that more manifest, and what ways can we actually make, in a practical way, make that more real in our lives. Okay? Now, I know you've already had your attitudes and responsibilities module with Hilary, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these, but if you think of yourself, that feeling you were getting there, that peace and that inner stillness, that is the level, that's you as Source. Much magnified, of course, if you're at the level of Source, but at that level of Source, we are all masters of energy. And it is our divine birthright to rediscover ourselves as masters. all right? Because a master of energy, a master of creation, knows how the thing works and knows what to do in order to get the results he or she wants, okay? Now, the attitudes and responsibilities of mastery are very practical ways to enable us to see where we may not be acting out of love in our lives and where we can actually bring ourselves more into alignment with the energy of true love, all right? And it was very interesting when I was looking at these to see that each one of them refers to the all oneness. That the true mastery, is where we have that conscious and feeling connection to source. And from that, we act in ways that are congruent with the original intention, okay? So every one of them connects back to that oneness, right? So we have the love, all right, is obviously an attitude, recognition of the truth of the all oneness. We are all one, right? Grace is allowing the all oneness to be what it is, regardless of whether or not it suits you. I like that one. Living perpetual forgiveness. And, you know, Ash, there's a really nice, actually, discussion of this in the Dance for Life workshop from Sarasota, if any of you have that or if you ever get it, where she talks for about half an hour on these attitudes. And she talks about the thing of forgiveness, that forgiveness is a stage on the way to love, all right? It's an aspect, but if you have to forgive somebody, in a sense, you've already judged, right? If you need forgiveness, it means, well, you've done something wrong, as it were, okay? But it is a stage, it's a step on the way towards love. But eventually we realize, well, you know, forgiving, if I say, I forgive you, there's a certain, judgment even in that, okay? But it's still a step on the way, all right? But at a certain point, if you feel enough of an anchoring and a connection to your own inner self, you won't be threatened by what other people do. So there won't be the need for forgiveness in the same way, because you will realize that you are master of your own destiny and that they can't really control your destiny anyway, or they can't hurt you, or they can't, upset you unless you've let them. So you begin to learn a strength in yourself as the mastery. Now, when we're talking about this is the ideal, and we all are still working towards this. So if you feel, well, gosh, today I certainly didn't follow that one today or yesterday, that's all right, because a lot of our healing at the moment is becoming even conscious of the fact that we are acting in ways that may not be promoting the full experience of love for us. All right? So the awareness of it, even the awareness of it itself, is enough to sort of begin to let the mental body have a bit more say in how we operate our lives. Okay? So all of them, gratitude, appreciating the all oneness, knowing your aliveness, gratitude and appreciation are really, really important. They remind me a little bit, remember we were talking earlier about the backflow, you go back to source and then the backflow return, because the little spark goes back to source, source gives it even more, okay? And if you have I know we have children, and many of you have, or if you have a child, if a child says to you, thank you, your impulse is to give them more, because there's actually a creation energy and appreciation. And if you read the responsibilities of mastery, it talks about that there's an energy reality where if you give appreciation, it actually creates more of what you're appreciating. All right? So it is an aspect, it's an expression of love to appreciate. And even the people in our environment that may seem to be thorns in our side, as it were, or may seem to be the ones that really drive us nuts. If we can even for a moment go to still point, okay, all right, if I'm a master of my hologram, why are you doing what you're doing to me, as it were, okay? And you can come from a point of love and say, well, maybe you're showing me something, right? Maybe you're showing me something that's in my own energy that I can't see right now. Or maybe you're showing me, if I can observe maybe what you're doing and how that's working or not working, you're showing me something. Everybody in our environment, even the people that we might have problems with, are actually gifts to us. And if we can begin to have that attitude towards them, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to change what they're doing, because that's not our business. But we can certainly change our attitudes towards them and say, okay, I can hold a space of love for you. But that, as we're going to see in a little while, holding a space of love does not mean we let them walk all over us, because that's not loving ourselves, okay? But we'll talk about that in a few minutes, all right? Now, so these are all attitudes. I think we can all see how they would all connect with the energy of love, okay? Showing respect, being responsible for our own energy, Because if we're not, we're going to end up blaming somebody else or getting into power struggles with people. So the more we are in our own power, the more self-sovereign we are, the better position we are to have a loving relationship with anybody else. And this even goes into terms of our intimate relationships. We had the most recent workshops with Ashiana have been very powerful, and among other things they've been discussing the whole understanding of relationships and sexuality and all of the interplay that goes on in those situations. And interestingly, the first workshop of those was in Denver in the summer, and it was mainly focusing on, again, if you want to have a relationship with somebody else, you need to develop your own relationship to source and take care of your own energy field and really strengthen yourself as a gift to the person that you're having a relationship with, nothing else. Okay? All right. So again, these are all mindfulness, fearlessness, engaged detachment, and joy, because we are talking about joy as well. And as I said to you, in the materials, the words love and joy are often used in the same context, because if we really can anchor and embody the understanding of love, there is also tremendous joy. Now, when we're talking about things like love and joy, and especially in the environment we're in, that doesn't mean we deny. Like if we say, we're encouraging you to feel I am joy. But if you say I am joy and the next thing you burst into tears, okay, or you feel great grief, honor that. Because that is maybe by allowing yourself to think about the understanding of joy, something that was not joy is able to come up and actually be healed. So we're not talking about denying the fact that you may have grief and sadness and loss, because we've all been through these dimensions for millions of years, and we've all played the game, and we do have things that we may need to release. So when we say joy, it doesn't mean denying. It's not happy, I'm happy, and I'm not going to look at the sadness, okay? Because that's denial, all right? If you feel sadness, often, certainly it's been my experience, that when you allow yourself and you be kind to yourself and nurture yourself through it, there's a tremendous joy at the other side of it, right? And I'm sure some of you found that when you allow yourself, okay, if you're having a day where you really don't feel well, rather than saying, well, rather than pretending you don't feel sad, just allow it, but without letting it out on anybody else and without indulging it either. But just say, okay, that's a part of me that's hurting and that I can love and nurture. And sometimes even allowing yourself to do that relaxes your system, and there's a tremendous joy, because all the things that are coming up for healing now are energies that have been with us maybe for a long time. And when we let go of them and heal them, there is a tremendous understanding that we gain and a tremendous joy. And we learned the fact, as I said earlier, if we have been, if we're up there in source and we're eternally in love and eternally in joy, maybe we don't fully appreciate it because it's just what way things are there. Okay? Now we've done the dimensional trip, many of us, lots of times, round and round and round we've gone. And in a way, the fact, I know, and Ash has talked about this very recently, because she was talking in one of the workshops, why has this particular environment we're in been allowed to go to the extent it's gone, okay, where, there's wars and there's stuff that we don't like. And it's because there have been tremendous things learned. Sometimes in the dimension, certainly when we go into creation, sometimes one way anyway of learning what something is to discover what it isn't, all right? Okay, it is one way of learning, and maybe it was very brave souls who decided to come into this environment, okay, and actually say, okay, I'm going into an environment where I know it can get extreme, but if you can still hold that Christos spark and that Christos energy, that is a tremendous victory for the power of love in you, all right? And we see that, I certainly see it in the environment everywhere around me, that you can have, okay, things are not easy in some ways, and things are, there's like what's going on in the world stage may sometimes seem quite, and certainly not love, put it that way. But ordinary people are manifesting, even if they're under pressure and they've got all their problems, they still have that spark of love and you still see it in them. And maybe that is a tremendous victory for the energy of love, that it can go into what is actually a very, very intense and almost, quite what might seem to be a negative environment, and still that spark of love, that manu spark, is still alive in people, right? And they can be kind and good and in integrity with what they believe is right. So there is a tremendous amount that has been learned about love because we have learned the opposite. So it isn't about denying the fact that you may feel sad sometimes, You may not like somebody. Okay, if you don't like somebody, ask yourself, well, what are they reflecting back to me? Sometimes the thing that we don't like in somebody else is something that's in ourselves that we don't want to look at. Quite often it's that, okay? And when we realize that, it's not about, oh gosh, I'm terrible. It's not about beating ourselves up. It's realizing, I am an eternal being, but there's just a part of me that's manifesting in this particular way. It's an energy in my system. It's not a reflection of my worth, okay? Because as in the Kathara manual, there's a very nice description about love and about judgment, okay? And it's good to apply this to ourselves as well. We may not like the action, whether it's our own action or somebody else's, but we can still love the person, all right? So, but when we sometimes have to assess. I mean, when we're talking about love, we're not talking about everything is wonderful and beautiful and there's nothing wrong going on, okay? That's a denial, okay? But we can have a feeling of love, we can assess, we can say, okay, that action may be not appropriate, but you can still hold an energy of love for the person. Love is defined in the Kathara manual as a state of vibrational harmonization. Okay, state of vibrational harmonization. Okay, and if you think of that is very much likely what Source would feel for all of its creations. Okay, Source allows this creation to go out, and there is nothing in creation that Source would say, that's not part of me, I'm denying that. Okay, so Source would have a sense of harmonization with everything in creation, even if that particular manifestation of itself was acting in a way that might be in what we would call ungodly. The love would still be there, okay? So it's just to distinguish that for ourselves as well as when we're dealing with other people. Because when we come to self-love and talking about self-love, we realize that really the way we treat anybody else is a direct reflection of the way we treat ourselves, right? Okay? And we'll come to that in a few moments. Alrighty. So their attitudes of mastery, and then, what happened? I thought I had responsibility. I had responsibilities, they seem to have disappeared. But anyway, the responsibilities of mastery. Okay, they've gone back to Source. Okay, all right. Anyway, the responsibilities of mastery, again, I know that Hilary talked about them, and they're widely available. They're available on the website, they're available in a lot of the materials, okay? And it was very interesting because the responsibilities of mastery were actually given to us on a workshop we went to with Ashiana, and the name of the workshop is The Dance for Love. So they were given in the context of love, okay? And they're really, really well worth reading. They're like little guidelines for how can you manifest more of love in your life and more of joy, okay? And self-love is one of the responsibilities, which is interesting. And so is, one of them is the freedom to own your own hologram, as it were. I can't, what was the actual expression, but it was to be responsible for your own energy and to recognize that you are the creator of your own hologram, and freedom, it's called freedom from the victim-victimizer game, okay, which is such a major one in our planet right now, okay, and when you really even get a taste of that love within you, certainly on the good days, now we all have bad days, okay, when we get into the stuff, okay, we're still, and you know, love yourself through those, okay, but the days when you do feel that inner peace and that inner stillness, if somebody did something to you, or it looks like they did something to you, you would still be in that peace and it wouldn't really get to you, all right? And you would realize, well, okay, that's because of something in them. They can't upset me, okay? People can only upset us or hurt us or whatever if something in us has allowed them to do that, okay? So if we find in our lives these things happening in our hologram, they may be teaching us about ways that we're using our energy which is not honoring ourselves, okay? Which is, you know, because we cannot really give anything to anybody else unless we're also giving it to ourselves, right? So these are the affirmations of divine love. These are really nice. And again, you know, love is blind, but the neighbours ain't, and all that. All right? True love is not blind. Remember that eye of God we were talking about earlier? Okay, it sees all. All right, but true love is not blind, okay? True love is actually very, very aware, all right, highly aware. God love embraces all, and it embraces everything, even if in our terms it would not seem to be would not seem to be godly. With heart resolute, principle firm, and eyes wide open. Okay, so it's a very aware love. It's not sort of just like Valentine's Day type of love or sugary sweetie love, that kind of thing. Okay, that is valid as long as it's expressed, as long as we are also strong in the power of love, romantic love, and all of those things are valid. But the core of love is our connection to source. Okay, and as with all of the work, if you begin to even say that, is that actually in your handout? I think it might be. Yeah. If you actually read that in the Anahasi as well, it will strengthen, it will have a stronger energy for you. So it's Adin, Ador, Enasa, Yane Sadore, Umeska E, Jawan, Usta E, Ria Bentore, Imsa Ida. Okay, and you're really, so if you're, like, it would be nice one to just get used to saying, or saying it in English and then in Anahasi, as I think we was you saying, Fraz, that when we say it in English, apart from the fact that we can actually understand it, but it anchors us in this time vector for us, where we are right now, all right? So it does help us where we are. And what it helps to do is bridge the gap from where we are in our time vector to our eternal self. And then the Anahasi would obviously contain the sound tones, obviously adore. And it's interesting because we have the word to adore somebody, okay? And that word adore comes through a lot of the work, okay? The word or would be an aspect of light, okay? J'adore in French, right? And adoration, it's in so many languages, okay? And again, in our languages, it's quite often been made to sort of be paying homage to something outside yourself, to adore a god or something like that. Whereas it's actually to adore the God, it's really more to embody the love of God's source, okay? And feel that, okay? So that's a really nice one. You can just have that and read it or whatever, okay? If there are questions or comments, feel free to interrupt me, okay? Is it making sense so far? You can identify with it. And what I would hope, apart from anything else, that you get a feeling sense of your connection to this information, okay? Because then the rest will fall into place for you quite well, okay? Now we're coming to, yes?
There's only one thing, that is that there's two foreheads in the book.
Oh, that's just a misprint, yeah, well, you're just getting an extra, little bit of extra love. Okay. What line was that connected with?
Principle.
Maybe we needed a bit of extra principle there. Okay, all right. That's funny, isn't it? Yeah. And it's very nicely summarized in the Indian greeting, Namaste. Which is such a beautiful greeting. It's a really, some of you probably heard that one. They still use it. Indian people still use that. And Namaste is like saying, I acknowledge the divine within me, I acknowledge the divine within you. And they do it like this. And it's like respect, it's out of respect. It's not out of subservience. But it's like, I know you're God and I know I'm God. And it's like God's talking to each other. It's God is kind of having a chat through us, kind of thing. Okay? So there's that energy with the omni love. All right. Now, so soft love. Here we are now. Soft love. I think we're all familiar with soft love. All right. It's the one we associate with love. All right. As it says in the material, it's a bit like the mother and small child, and you're just cuddly and gentle and loving and the nice expression of love that we'd like it to be, as it were. Okay? So soft love is always built upon sincerity, kindness, and respect. Soft love isn't weak. Okay? Weak love is, if we're being soft with somebody out of weakness because we're afraid to be strong, then that isn't soft love, that's something different. Okay? But soft love is we're in our strength and we can be very kind and nurturing and gentle. Developing the ability to carry the soft love frequency takes time, attention, and practice, and requires healing of unresolved issues from childhood and karmic reaction patterns that disrupt the soft love vibration. It's like you have to be really strong to be gentle. I can remember my grandmother saying that when I was a child. She says it's to be, or somebody was describing, yes, I think it was my grandmother saying something like, a really gentle person is very strong, right? Being gentle is not weakness. Okay, it's actually you're strong enough that you can be gentle. You're strongly enough anchored in your own power that you can be gentle and soft with people as appropriate. Okay, so soft love is a nice one, but I mean it doesn't work. Obviously, it doesn't work in all situations. Okay, sometimes we need to use what's called tough love. Okay, and my feeling around this is that when we get stronger and stronger in our own direct anchoring and embodiment of love, that we won't even have to distinguish in our minds which way we're expressing it, because we will naturally know which one to use in a given situation. But while we're still relearning the lessons of love, as it were, it's useful to see that what we call love sometimes in our society is not necessarily true love, okay? And sometimes, particularly tough love, sometimes it's got a very bad press, okay? That if you're firm with somebody, or that they, teenagers can throw this at you, you don't love me, you won't let me out, so you don't love me, that kind of stuff, okay? And sometimes it's because you love them that you say no, right? So tough love is an empowered love. I love that expression. In one of the workshops, Ashiana talked about empowered love. And for me, that actually is really even more powerful than the expression tough love, because you're enough in your own power that you can actually stand firm if you need to. Okay? And apparently one of the big lessons that as races, especially the indigo and angelic human races, one of our big lessons has been to learn empowered love, when to say no, right? And not to let other people manipulate us or control us or fool us in any way. We've been a bit too nice. And being very nice is not necessarily always being loving. Okay? And again, in our culture, somebody being nice all the time might seem to be loving, but you need to also be able to say no and to be firm. And okay, I think a lot of us are learning that lesson. I know I've been learning that one, and I think a lot of us have. Okay? And again, as I was saying earlier, depending on our balance of energy, some people would be very good at tough love. Somebody who's a really good disciplinarian, and they may need to learn a bit of softness. And then a lot of us may be very good at the soft love, but we may not be good at the stronger, the strength aspect of it. So we're all coming into balance. And it's not to sort of say, there's nothing wrong with us if we're expressing a bit out of balance yet, still, okay? Just when we catch ourselves and realize, well, maybe sometimes, do I love him enough to say no to him, if it's a child, or do I love him to say, enough to say, no, you can do better than that, okay? But if it's done from a standpoint of love. Now, sometimes tough love can be used as a bit of an excuse to be harsh. And remember, it said in Postures of Love, it's still kind and nurturing. It's still coming from that perspective that I know that I'm God, I know you're God, I love you, I care about you, but this isn't appropriate, okay? It's not an excuse to be harsh, to be punishing, or to be cruel, or anything like that. Because sometimes people, may say it's tough love, and they're actually, it's not love. The tough is there, but the love isn't, okay? So tough love approach, and I remember actually one of our chaos friends, we were talking about this once in an e-chat, and he said maybe the reason why we call it tough love